Shaka. Okay. Shaka McGlotten is professor of media studies and anthropology at Purchase College, which is a SUNY school in New York State, just right outside of New York City, where they also serve as chair of the gender studies program there. An anthropologist and artist, their work stages encounters between Black study, queer theory, media, and art. They have written and lectured widely on networked intimacies and messy computational entanglements as they interface with queer of color life worlds. They are the author of Dragging, or In the Drag of a Queer Culture, which was published by Routledge in 2021, and Virtual Intimacies, Media, Affect, and Queer Sociality, published in 2013 by SUNY Press. They are also co-editor of 2 edited collections, Black Genders and Sexualities from Palgrave, 2012, and Zombies and Sexuality, McFarland, 2014. I've known Shaka for a really long time. When I was still a student, and I remember we hung out one summer in Berlin together and talked a lot about my dissertation at the time, and it's been a real pleasure to just stay engaged with Shaka, and we always just seem to be kind of working on similar things, even if we don't end up talking about them. So I think you're gonna be talking about computational hexes, yes, maybe, but I just did this whole project on AI religiosity and the occult, and yep, here we are aligning once again. So anyway, please welcome Shaka, everyone.
You didn't tell them about the Craigslist, the Craigslist personals, the near miss hookup? Okay, well, I can tell them. You guys don't know what a Craigslist personals are? Not anymore? You do? You're still like, you're 11 or 12. All right. Yeah. I'm Shaka. Hi. Very happy to be here amongst such great company. Thanks, Zach, for inviting me to play with you. Jort and Jorinda and everyone at Rietveld, you've been such great hosts, and I really admire what you've been putting together here this year and apparently all these other years. To the students, I hope you recognize how amazing these opportunities really are, and I hope you take full advantage. I look forward to learning from you too in the discussion, or maybe just by watching you sleep peacefully during my talk. So this is a slightly different version of what I had planned to do. This is a new iteration of this project. So Glitchcraft is part of what I'm calling the Computational Hex, which attends to some of the weird and witchy contours of our algorithmic ordinary, from the rise of the algorithm-driven astrology app CoStar that all of my Black, queer, femme friends got into at the same time, to the prevalence of witch talk on TikTok, to an abundance of witchy pandemic media rabbit holes I fell into with my partner. We have another Buffy reference here. Not just Buffy, but WandaVision, Loki, Doctor Strange, The Witcher, Sabrina, you get the idea. So here I use Glitchcraft to underscore the exciting enchantments that generative AI might produce, their frustrating constraints, and the accidents, induced, serendipitous, dangerous, that might result. So what can generative AI teach us about sex? Not nothing, but not everything either. With careful prompt generation, one can learn about the most popular sexual positions in the US, the broad historical outlines of technology and the regulation of sex, or where to find popular fan fiction / archives. In these ways and others, one can be impressed by the democratizing power of these tools in the ways they make accessing knowledge easier, echoing earlier cyber-utopian beliefs in the internet's leveling power. So suppose one asked ChatGPT what it can teach about sex. In that case, it will answer that it can be used to teach users about sex ed, health, and wellness, as well as address taboos, provide counseling and support, and offer a space, this is key, for the creative exploration of fantasies. Its answers are wary, vague, and evasive, and there's this persistent emphasis on context and ethics. And to be clear, this isn't the chatbot's vagueness, wariness, or evasiveness, but its parent company, OpenAI. So, as an artsy queer anthropologist who studies media and technology, I am, of course, very much for context and ethics, especially given the toxic virulence of so much of our technological public square, or the many damning histories of Western technoscience. Sex education, therapy, promoting consent, exploring fantasies, I'm for all of these things. Even when asking ChatGPT about the intertwined histories of sexuality and technology, I can find myself impressed. It gives me stories about the history of the printing press and the ways that the press was used to produce screeds against masturbation, or the history of relationship advice columns, the roles played by photography and film in the development and circulation of porn, including the history of porn made by computers, like this one, which began as a prank by Leon Harmon and Ken Knowlton, who were computer scientists, and who created this giant, probably not much smaller than this. When their dissertation advisor was away, they used a computer to create this image as a prank. Later, Robert Rauschenberg took this image on. It was the first, and I think to date only, nude image ever published in the New York Times. ChatGPT can also tell me about the birth of internet sexual cultures, which I was actually there for. Although, when I get these results from ChatGPT, I also see things that I would have done, right? I would have, cited Thomas LaCour's book, Solitary Vice, about the history of masturbation, Thomas Waugh's Hard to Imagine, about the history of gay film and photography, Raina Rapp's Testing the Fetus, almost anything by Donna Haraway, and probably some of my own work. After all, talks like these are spaces for self-promotion. So if the right prompt might teach you something about the development of horny science fiction fandoms, hint, it starts here, the wrong prompt or the use of a sexually coded term can trigger a content policy violation. So what happens when you try to pressure these systems by asking them to produce something sexy? So although ChatGPT notes that creativity and fantasy are two of the potential benefits we might obtain from generative AI, it won't actually produce any erotic content, at least not purposefully. So at least one of my efforts to have it write a short story focused on a twink who writes erotic fan fiction was flagged as potentially violating the company's content policy, although it did produce a draft nonetheless. So the company forbids, this is their usage policy language, quote, adult content, adult industries, and dating apps, including content meant to arouse sexual excitement, such as the description of sexual activity, or that promotes sexual services, including sexual education and wellness, erotic chat, and pornography, end quote. And of course, these content moderation policies are really opaque because they're proprietary. Although news outlets have reported that OpenAI has said recently its newer models will allow it to replace human content moderation with, you may have guessed, AI. So there are many significant constraints surrounding the use of these now widely available chatbots and image generators as companies implement guardrails that significantly limit the production of sexually explicit content, with a particular concern for inputs and outputs that concern the figure of the child. And the figure of the child presents not only moral and ethical questions about their representation, but particular technical difficulties present in identifying those representations. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with kind of the body of queer theory, but sort of thinking about the figure of the child, probably like early 2000s, it became like there was a book by this guy, Lee Edelman. It's kind of, I'm not crazy for the book, but it was very interesting, called No Future. And in it, he talks a lot about the figure of the child as this part of a normative demand toward what he calls, and other people called, reproductive futurism. So the child functions in very powerful ways symbolically as a figure of innocence and purity and straightness, right? From a kind of technical standpoint with machine learning systems, when trying to do things like detect child pornography, it's really difficult to do because you're using systems that are basically working with how faces are made or arranged, how bodies are made and arranged, but bodies aren't universalizable, right? So they're sometimes called things like the Asian woman problem. So an Asian woman's face to a computer looks like a child's face. And so, different kinds of content will get flagged, by mistake. And I have a friend, Mitali Thakur, who's done really interesting research with people who are trying to forensic investigations of child porn, who's worked with police departments. She's an ethnographer, so she goes in and works with them, and also with the technicians who do this. And so to anyone who's more interested in that, I recommend her work. So the opaque content moderation policies of these contemporary technology platforms they form an uneven patchwork of governance protocols. And what we know about why popular tools such as ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, or image generators such as Midjourney or Leonardo flag some terms and not others is really limited. While some content moderation policies, like the one I read from ChatGPT, clearly prohibit nudity and sexually explicit content, this does not necessarily prevent users from developing workarounds or keep the programs from hallucinating sexual content by mistake. And that's the term that's used when these different kinds of AI platforms generate mistakes, which I think is really interesting. It's called hallucinating. So if you ask, for example, to give me work by Shaka McGlotten, it might give you things that I'd actually done. And then if you ask, can you give me a little bit more work like that? It might generate titles of work that sound completely reasonable, like things I would have written, but they don't actually exist. So the moderation policies often don't align with what users want or how they use the platforms. And this is, I think, especially the case and especially important for queer counterpublics for whom networked intimacies have proven essential means for the exploration, formation, and expression of identities, aesthetics, and politics. So it's important to underscore here that AI tools are probabilistic, right? They use the past to predict the future. I'm part of a network of scholars, activists, artists, researchers called the Critical Race and Digital Studies Network. And part of the work that many of us have done is look at how the relationships between past, present, and future intersect and how they are of life and death import, especially for minoritarian groups. So things like predictive policing, algorithmic bias in the distribution of public resources, or the high error rates of biometric technologies. These are only a few of the ways that some of us have tied these technologies to longer histories of race, gender, sexuality, and their production and reproduction. So this probabilistic foundation is why so many of the results chatbots produce are so mealy-mouthed, right? So if you've ever played with these tools, there's this very on the one hand, on the other kind of output. And in the story about the twink who writes fan fiction that I mentioned at the beginning, it was really, really boring, right? If you actually posted it to a fan fiction archive or site, you would have really, I would have gotten read to filth. So it's why I can tell when my students, and there really have only been a handful over the last year or so, I can tell when they use it, right? I can kind of see it from a mile away. There's this, as I said before, this kind of wariness, this vagueness, this evasiveness, but also a familiarity, right? All of those Netflix shows and films that seem assembled by algorithms, right? You've seen this many, many times, right? Strong female lead develops supernatural powers and has to come to terms with her new identity while navigating school and saving the world on the regular. Yeah, dude, I've already seen Buffy. So in a 2023 New Yorker article, Ted Chiang described ChatGPT as a blurry JPEG of the web. He writes, quote, "Think of ChatGPT as a blurry JPEG of all the text on the web. It retains much of the information in the same way that a JPEG retains much of the information of a higher resolution image. But if you're looking for an exact sequence of bits, you won't find it. All you will ever get is an approximation. But because the approximation is presented in the form of grammatical text, which ChatGPT excels at creating, it's usually acceptable. You're still looking at a blurry JPEG, but the blurriness occurs in a way that doesn't make the picture as a whole look less sharp," end quote. This lossy compression analogy that Chiang uses is also really helpful, I find, in understanding the hallucinations produced by generative AI. So again, as numerous scholars have observed in recent years, various predictive technologies, including Gen AI, reproduce existing inequalities, reflecting violent histories of oppression and extraction that have characterized so much of Western technoscientific histories in relationship to groups marked differently by indigeneity, race, gender, class, ability, and so on. So OpenAI and others in the AI game, and there are more every day. In fact, I think I just read an article or saw the headline of an article that Saudi Arabia is going to put something like $4 billion into developing their own AI. So all of the big players in the game are really struggling to address this sort of panoply of ethical concerns while simultaneously trying to achieve something like market dominance. So in the Critical Race and Digital Studies Network, lots of people have been pointing to the dangers of AI for a number of years. And for many, the problems presented by these tools are not exceptional, right? They're not mere glitches. Instead, as the data journalist and scholar Meredith Broussard notes, they are, quote, structural biases, and they can't be addressed with a quick code update, end quote. Like Sophia Noble and Ruha Benjamin, Broussard underscores the persistence of technological biases. Rather than a glitch, something supposedly temporary, Broussard describes these biases as bugs, as, quote, substantial, ongoing, and deserving of attention, end quote. So I admire her work a lot. I'm friends with her, and I find her argument convincing. But I want to retain the use of the term glitch. So like Legacy Russell in Glitch Feminism, I think there are a lot of political and creative possibilities tied to glitching. Glitches can prompt the violent socio-cultural machine to hiccup, sigh, shudder, buffer. Glitch feminism, you can see here, I'll just read the quote, demands an occupation of the digital as a means of world building. It allows us to seize the opportunity to generate new ideas and resources for the ongoing revolution of bodies that can inevitably move and shift faster than away from keyboard mores or the societies that produce them, under which we are forced to operate offline. So, I'm a queer studies scholar among other things, and, so I'm always interested in thinking about and have written about sex for a long time. And so, sexuality in this area is like a particularly charged material affective field. For queer people, as I noted before, networked intimacies serve as collective forms of memory and as cultural adhesives. So whether you're talking about porn or hookup apps, and so on. And these also undergo ongoing transformations with each introduction of new technologies or each new iteration of a technology. So it's telling but not surprising that generative AI, much like the rest of the internet, demonstrates a heteronormative bias that pushes a lot of queer content into what scholar Alex Monet calls the digital closet. And what he means by this is that it's not just that you can't find queer content online, right? You can go to like porn sites and find, all this, queer sex, whatever. But he's saying that the underlying logics, like the underlying code, the way things have been assembled, tagged, defined, categorized, that illustrates a kind of deep heteronormative bias, right? If you ever go to these, porn tube sites and you wonder why it is all the categories are presented in the way that they are, right? It doesn't actually have to be that way, right? And he argues that this is kind of part of this like deep logic, this sort of deep heteronormative logic that organizes a lot of what we do online. So even if you think like queerness is everywhere, all the time, just think about, the Instagram and the nipple ban, or what you can and can't do on TikTok, right? Like all of the platforms have like real constraints in the ways that you can represent sexuality. So in the remainder of my time, I want to show you some experiments that I did that kind of like illustrate a little bit about how these platforms regulate and filter queer sexual content. And I want to reflect on these with you and maybe play with you a little bit. We'll do some prompts of our own. And I'm going to focus particularly on the figure of the twink. And maybe I should provide a definition for those of you who aren't twinks or might not know any, despite your clear commitment to the fine arts. So in the lexicon of queer embodiments, twinks are often characterized by their youthful exuberance, slim physique, minimal body hair, and typically racialized whiteness. The twink flirts with boundaries between boyhood and adulthood, innocence and carnality, the feminine and masculine. From the perspective of queer literary, critical, and popular traditions, the twink shares a lot of historical antecedents, like all the way from Hellenistic ideals through Renaissance art, as well as figuring prominently in queer representational histories tied to the emergence of modern technologies of mass reproduction, from photography, film, television, to the modern internet. And the term twink, even though it's been around for a while, it really didn't enter even into like gay lexicons until the early 2000s, and really it comes in through pornography. But now, and at the time it was really like, this is like the sexually available white suburban kid next door, but this has now like totally entered the mainstream. There was a widely circulated 2018 New York Times Magazine article called "Welcome to the Age of the Twink," which prominently featured, of all things, like straight twinks like Timothy Chalamet or Spider-Man, this little Zendaya's boyfriend. And the figure of the twink is now viral, with numerous memes dedicated to them, including prominently those about, maybe you know about this, evil twink energy? You should go see Dune, by the way. Isadora was right. It's like a very weird movie. Okay. So evil twink energy, that's where I'm at, yes. Okay, do you guys know what how many of you have heard of evil twink energy before? I know the evil twinks won't raise their hands, but. Okay, so you've heard of evil twink energy. So does anyone want to like explain the one on the left? What are the different the different stories? I saw you on your phones. I know you know social media. Yeah. Yeah, the context. So like, what are the three?
I think the first one is. Wait.
Oh, you could just talk loud. It's fine.
Okay. The first one, I saw it on Twitter, and apparently this guy, the guy that you see there, he hooked up with someone, and then he took the video at his home without the guy that lived there knowing.
Yeah.
And then his partner found out that he got cheated on through this TikTok.
Yes.
So I guess evil twink because no cheating.
You want to pass the mic, or you want to do another one?
I know the one with the Senate, which is like fucking insane. It's this guy that got like exposed through his close friend's Instagram story with having quite a wild time in the Senate in Washington.
Yeah.
And one day I just opened Twitter, and then I remember seeing the video because apparently the people that I follow there love seeing stuff like that. And I saw the whole video of him having, sex
Yeah,
in
it'd
the
be like-
Senate with
Yeah,
like
figure out how to
where
have
in
sex
the
in the Hague or something. Yeah,
yeah, in like the what is it called, the auditorium where they
Yeah.
they
Oh, the-
legislate things
full on,
and
yeah.
laws, and yeah, it's disturbing. But the third one is I'm not aware. Anyone who's
Anyone knows the third
yeah.
one?
Is it the he escaped from prison in the UK? Is it this guy?
I don't know. I forgot.
Oh, okay.
My
I
partner
think
sent it to
he-
me, but
I
I think it
think
is. I think that's right.
He was in prison and he escaped on a delivery van.
that's right.
And yeah, and then was on the run in London for a few days, and eventually I think got found at his mom's house. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And then of course the second one is the second one here is like one I just came across. Yeah, my twink boyfriend turned into a genocidal dictator cinematic universe. So you have both the Hunger Games, Star Wars, Dune. Yeah. So beware the twink. We'll talk more. So it bears repeating that none of these major image generators, DALL-E, Midjourney, Leonardo, permit sexually explicit content. But some will produce not safe for work content by accident. So, but there are dozens of websites that use AI technology to produce sexually explicit material. And this goes from creating nudes, like you can upload a photo of someone and then the AI will undress them, to doing face swapped, which is kind of a quite well-known like deepfake technique, right, where you might have a video and the face, you can replace the face with the face of someone else. You can generate photorealistic or anime-inspired nudes from scratch on other sites. What I wanted to do like with this, so this is really like these series of experiments. So I wanted to pressure these systems to kind of just see what I could get away with. And I started with a simple experiment. And when I started these experiments, I was at this conference in Honolulu last November, the Society for the Social Study of Science called Forest. There'll be another one here in Amsterdam in July. And at the time I was presenting this stuff on glitchcraft, and I had no idea what my talk really had to do with the conference theme. Like I'd somehow gotten into this conference, but I had no idea what I was really doing. And the conference theme was really endearing, but long and awkward and long-winded. It was called Sea, Sky, and Land, engaging in solidarity in endangered ecologies. It's like real mouthful. And so I was like, okay, so what would happen if I put this prompt into these different image generators, but with a little variation? Because what's a conference without sexy people? So I wanted to put this in, and I played with the modifiers attractive and sexy. So my first result from DALL-E, which is the same company as OpenAI, no sexy. They are not bringing sexy back. And then Midjourney was another one. I wasn't crazy for it either. Again, it immediately flagged sexy. And when I removed the term sexy, I just took it out, then I was left with these really weird religious images. So this is Sea, Sky, and Land engaging in solidarity in endangered ecologies, like a group of scholars. Oh, you're one behind. Oh. Okay. Right? And this was DALL-E. And this is Leonardo. Not Leonardo, sorry. This was Midjourney. And I was like, this is really weird, or maybe it's not weird because sometimes scholars are kind of like monks or supplicants, that this really is very kind of biblical. So in some, even in unstable diffusion, which was, at the time one of the most not safe for work friendly tools, twink was a flagged term. Leonardo was the most permissive. I got both sexy scholars, so this is sexy scholars, though this was an earlier model. You can still see weird mistakes, a diverse group of sexy scholars engaging in solidarity, sea, sky, land, etc. You can see some of the distortions that are still evident, right? The models weren't as good as hands then as they are now. And also, note that if you use a term like diverse, it is productive of brown and black people, right? It's immediately coded to produce that. which is also weird. But I did finally get a twink. Okay. So this was the prompt. Hawaiian twink in a swimsuit handing out pamphlets at an academic conference being held on a beach with an older and diverse group of scholars. I don't know, maybe like get out the vote campaign or something, right? So the first version of this image that I got, actually, there was like, you see the children there. There was a similar row of children, and several of the girls were bare-breasted, but like kind of like borderline pubescent. So it had hallucinated material that you can't get it to generate on its own. And of course I didn't ask for that, and I chose not to show it, even though one can easily find such images in, say, ethnographic texts. And I think having the term Hawaiian, beach, these things generated this kind of almost like quasi-ethnographic image. And we can talk about ethnography and workarounds later, because I did play with that at a later time. Okay. So even in the Twitterverse, I'm never going to call it X, it seems like some folks can take things too far. So there's this popular digital artist, Yeri Sign, who uses a variety of methods to produce computer-generated erotica and porn. He had his AI twink page shut down. Let's see. Nope. Let's see, where did they go? Here we are. Yeah, okay. So he had his popular AI twink page shut down. That was the image from on the left. And then he's moved on to like AI, to bodybuilders, you know, so it's like this horrible pun, AI athletic hunks. Yeah, it's really bad. There are other accounts that still persist, and he continues to sell his work online. And I should have definitely mentioned this earlier, like twinks are fine and sometimes really fine, but I'm not fixated. My own desiring repertoires are pretty expansive. But as a category or as a grammar, the term really represents a boundary case or something, right? For these systems, right? A twink is youthful and boyish. Maybe you can see the problem, right? This is, again, the sort of issue, the kind of figure of the child and these taboos around childhood sexuality. So I wanted to try some of these not safe for work, some of these like explicit image generators, and I found them to be incredibly lacking. Most are resolutely straight, and many you cannot even produce images of male-bodied people. Others like Pornderful AI produce some interesting results. So this is the default landing page, so it defaults to the gender as being woman. It has various drop-down menus that you can select from to create images, but if you change it to men, certain categories like sexual position aren't available anymore, right? So yeah, anyway. So I tried to make some of my own models. It was like, okay, trying to get twinks, trying to get like darker skin twinks, but you can see the glitchcraft for yourself, which you already had a preview of a moment ago. So the company's machine learning, so clearly the system was trained on very particular kinds of data sets, right? Ones that emphasized women's bodies over men's, as well as whiter bodies over darker ones. So I'm not really interested in like representational politics per se. Like when I think about diversity or technodiversity, I'm not really interested in like, oh, this is bad because we can't represent X, Y, or Z. But I am always interested in like how something is interesting to think with, right? Or how experiments or how failures can provoke new possibilities. So what can these images teach us about how technology shapes bodies or ideas about them or not, right? And for me, these are kind of fascinating mashups. They are not exactly trans bodies, but they might be, right? After all, we use technology to alter our bodies in so many ways, as Donna Haraway, Paul Preciado, and so many other feminists and queer scholars of technoscience have noted. When looking at these images, we might note their glitchiness, right? They're a little bit evocative of the biomechanical bodies of H.R. Giger or the body horror of David Cronenberg, though, of course, I'm not really horrified here. And we might, as I said, link this glitchiness to bias, to the whiteness of the models, to the gargantuan distortions. But this would miss the world-building potential of these glitches insofar as they might help incite us to think through gender-sex systems and their entanglement with histories of Western technoscience, as well as imagine new kinds of bodies, worlds, and desires for them. So I'll leave you with one final image, one last twink, really a duo, as a provocation for discussion. And we can also play a little bit. I have Leonardo up so we can make some images together if you'd like. So here's the image, and here's the prompt. I'm just curious what you see. Any observations? Shout it out, shout it out.
It's turned 4 black stallions into 2 horses and 2 men.
4 black stallions turn into 2 black men and 2 black horses. We still might have 4 black stallions depending on your point of view. Okay, did you notice on the left, the figure on the left, something about his foot, one of his feet. Nay. Okay. The mayor over there, I just assume it's the mayor wearing a dress, so it's kind of progressive, I guess. Yeah, I mean, Kehinde Wiley should definitely sue them for his palette. Anything else that you notice here? What was that? There is a kind of American flag up in the top. Good eyes, like young eyes, clearly. Yeah. So I asked for one twink. Because blackness is in the prompt, I didn't ask for black twinks. I asked for black stallions and 1 twink. I got 2 black men and 2 black horses. And again, I'm not interested in like the representational problem here, right? I'm not interested in it's a bad representation because it didn't do what I wanted, or it's a bad representation of blackness. I'm interested in like what the glitch might help us to think about, right? So, yeah. Little Nas, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know that. I'm a big fan of Lil Nas. Yeah, he was part of my pandemic and my Computational Hex project. I talk about, I know Montero, like yeah, anyway, we can have a whole conversation about Lil Nas X. Okay, so I think, yeah.
Where it said 4 black stallions, the 2 men are where the horses would be.
Yes.
So it's like you've got the people, but the horses are in the wrong place.
Yes.
Where the people are the horses.
Well, yeah, they're black stallions. So it's like, it's hallucinating this like racist response, right? Yeah. All right, so I thought we could make some images ourselves. Oh, for sure. I mean, absolutely. It's an organizing sexual fantasy around blackness. It's a very common term that you would hear referring to, like, you're drawing on this like long history of racialized sexual stereotypes. A black stallion, in lots of people's mind, is not a horse, right? Okay, let's do an experiment. Let's do it quickly. How much time do we have?
We have under 10 minutes.
Under 10 minutes. So let's just make maybe 1 or 2 prompts. It'll be like Mad Libs, right? Let's keep twink in the mix, maybe, for consistency's sake. And basically, all we have to do is come up with a prompt and make some images. See what happens. So this was, just to show you what I was working on with a student, kind of a little fancy cat hotel recently. And the prompt was a fantastical hotel, its slender frame adorned with intricate carvings. We don't have to get super involved because we can also use their prompt generation tools. So all we need is someone to maybe throw out, how about we do this? We'll do it like Mad Libs, totally. Give me a noun. What? A noun?
Twinkie.
Disco? Disco?
A twink
Okay.
at the Rietveld Academy.
Huh? Twinkie. Twink. Okay, we have disco, Twinkie, twink. We need a verb.
Eats.
Can someone give me a verb?
Eats.
Eat. Okay. Okay, I can see where this is going. A twink eats a Twinkie in a, maybe a adjective?
Juicy.
In a juicy disco. All right, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna, also these little neat tools that AI will help you make better AI prompts. So we'll generate a few new prompts. A twink with rainbow hair devours a Twinkie with a mischievous grin and a neon lit, sounds great, let's do that. We'll go back here. Maybe we will change, maybe we'll do, you guys are into fashion, I can see, we'll do another one with fashion. A glitter-covered twink indulges in a gooey, chocolate-filled Twinkie, well, perfect.
Yep.
Okay, we'll do another one. Let's do, I find illustration can be really nice. Let's turn off photoreal. Let's turn off Kino. I'm not really good at this part, I have to say, like, I just play with it until I get things that I like. We'll go back to prompt generation. A twink with a sweet tooth savors a Twinkie. Its creamy filling oozing, great. We'll do that one, we'll see what happens. And let's change this one more time, maybe into anime, right? So, generate. All right, the first one should be ready, depending on how fast your internet is and how, interesting. Let's add some motion. Oh, I can't do motion on this one, that's too bad. You can upscale it though. All right, not bad. I didn't ask for 2, but okay. Interesting. All right, let's go. Well, what do you notice about these images? They're all white? Yep. Yeah, the internet knows that twinks are normally white unless they're black twinks, and you have to say it's a black twink, right? Okay, this is a very dirty image. I like this one. Let us upscale it. Huh. Yeah, there's some glitchcraft. All right, let's see what else. Oh, yeah, now we're getting somewhere. Oh, wait, you know, this one we can do motion on. So I'm going to upscale it. And then I am going to generate a motion. Motion strength makes it really strong. Private, because I don't want people seeing how many twinks I'm making. And then, okay, maybe something here. And then let's go. So this is the one we ended up with. But so we didn't, oh, we did have dancing bodies here. I didn't notice that. I can make this one a motion video too. It's always harder to use technology when you are in front of a group. All right, now let's go to, oh wait, no, my personal feed. All right, we should be able to see. Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Julie, what did you do?
All right, we have that Twinkie. These are some ones I did with at this queer play. A digital auntie creates a networked rendering of a twink's post-COVID body. Those were before. Let's go back. Where's my personal feed? Did we do another motion one? It was just the one. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh wait, let's do that. Maybe not quite so strong. Okay. All right, we'll do this one last one, and then if you guys have questions or comments, I can start taking them now.
I'll just jump in as the keeper of the time.
Yeah,
We just
keeper of
have
the
a
time.
couple minutes left.
Okay.
So I think you have time for a question, or everyone can approach you throughout the day and talk more about
I have
generating
time for
twins
one
and
question,
tinkies.
so. This is the sequel to Dune. Yeah.
Because you evoked at the really beginning about printing and sexual content, and that maybe it's like it was really maybe at the beginning of printing systems, and that made me thought the whole time actually of books. Books have been exactly in the same kind of history than we are happening in AI and all of these glitches, because now there's an editor, there's a publisher, and there's a library. But it doesn't mean that there's all the books that has been done by a human that are presented to other people. And what I feel here, I'm not want to be the advocate of the devil, but it's like there is already all these different parameters of restrictions into like all these different technologies, and like, so of course it brings who is honing this and what are the limits towards it. But like my thought is more than a question is, shouldn't we let it free actually? Let it be happening, and be happening all these unfortunate sexual contents and all the worst things, because actually sometimes good things happens out of it somehow.
Yeah, I mean, so I had a really interesting conversation at this conference after the first time I gave this talk, and there was a philosopher of science and technology in the audience, and he was very, like, the whole time during the talk, I could see him, like, just totally freaking out, and he's like, he was like Hermione in, Harry Potter. He was like, I have a question, like, so are you saying we should, relax content moderation policies so people can produce child pornography? He just came right out and was like, should we do that? I was like, dude, like, I'm a theorist of ambivalence. Like, trying to get me to, like, take a stand like that, that's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that, like, you have these tools that have this promise, that are being promised, like the early internet, to be, like, utopian, or, like, at least accessible and democratized, and they're not. So let's think about that. Let's talk about that. I think that the presentation yesterday, with the lasers, Kate Cooper's, I think that there's something interesting there. Like, what would happen if you did let these things kind of do their own thing, which is a different question than what would it mean if you or I could make sexually explicit content. But I do think, like, the big picture of this, right, is that sort of, like with all of you, with TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, the sort of platformization of the internet, the way that essentially the internet now is like a bunch of gated communities, right, that unless you're like on Reddit or something, it's really just like a series of gated communities that there actually is very little, like, freedom within that. Like, there is freedom within constraints. So my view on this would be, like, I think that they should, first of all, be transparent. I think all algorithmic systems, AI systems, should be, like, auditable. Like, that's, my belief. And I think you should be able to someone should be able to tell me from OpenAI, like, why I can't make an image of a twink. Right? Like, tell me. Give it to me. Like, is it because what? I mean, the problem is, if you just ask sometimes for images of twinks, it will give you images, you might see my Caravaggio experiments here, it will give you images of children. That's the problem. That's the problem. You know?
It brings me to the follow-up of this, because most of these technologies, we are actually the developer of also of these technologies. Like all of these contents already exist from our own, like TikToks, Instagram content, and forums. So is it actually like we becoming literally the users and the developer at the same time? But is it our own perspective, our own like?
Yes and no. I would say yes and no. So like there's so many constraints that they've implemented, right? And you have to keep in mind that the people who scrubbed these chatbots, the people like who scrubbed ChatGPT of its toxic content, who had to go through and like all of these test cases, these are like Kenyan people in Kenya who are making like $2 a day, right? So is it us? Like, yeah, that's us. That's, you know, labor extraction. That's making people do really unpleasant, you know, work for very little money. It's but do the images and things like that, is it like our collective unconscious? I would say yes and no, because you have all of these like both, you know, filters that you can figure out, but also very, very, very opaque processes that you don't know. And I think as one of the presenters yesterday was talking about, Ramon was talking about, like one of the things with some of these systems, right, depending on the kind of system it is, but like a neural network or some of these other machine learning systems, like even the designers of the systems at a certain point are like, we don't really know what's going on in there. We only know based on the output whether, we're only making like an educated guess like about, based on the output, right? So like when Google, Google Photos was like tagging black people as gorillas like 10 years ago or something, they knew that that was a problem. And their solution was, well, we should not tag any images with gorillas. Like ever, like even images of gorillas. So, you know, these, you know, I think especially now when people are talking about like the AI like arms race, like these are gonna be like really like big, you know, these are really big important questions, yeah. I know we're out of time, but talk to me the rest of the day. I'll probably try to bum cigarettes from some of you later. Thank you.
Thanks, Shaka. Thank you so much.